Namaste. Welcome to this session. We are considering the Samapatti, and you should recall that Samapatti is psychology of Samadhi, and the Samadhi begins with a condition which is called Savitarka Samapatti. And in Savitarka Samapatti, we saw the definition Shabdartha Jnana Vikalpaihi Sankirna Savitarka Samapatti. So, if the meditative object is, say, Sri Rama, Sri Rama is the word, Sri Rama is the meaning, Sri Rama is the Jnanam. If the meditation is on Sri Krishna, Sri Krishna is the Shabda, Sri Krishna is the artha, Sri Krishna is the Jnana. If the meditative object is cow, cow is the word, cow is the meaning, cow is the knowledge. So that is Shabda, Artha, Jnana. The meditative object is constituted by the three aspects, namely Shabda, Artha, Jnana. That is the word, which is phonetic form. The meaning is actually the physical object, if it is a physical object. And then there is a cognitive aspect of it, which is the notion, idea, concept, which is called Jnana. So, the meditative object always has these three dimensions: Shabda dimension, Artha dimension, Jnana dimension. And we saw during the last session that there is a mix-up. And we saw with the help of analogy, a question, if by uttering the word Sri Rama, I put a question, what did I say? What did I say was a verbal form, sound form, phonetic form, and your answer was Sri Rama. Showing image of Sri Rama, I asked you the question, what is this? Again your answer was Sri Rama. And having either heard the word or having seen, if I asked you a question, what is in your mind? Again your answer was Sri Rama. So what did I say? What did you see? And what is in your mind? These are three questions for which there is a common answer, Sri Rama. So that is the Sankirnata, that's the mix-up. And then there is also Vikalpa. In Shabda, there is no Artha Jnana. In Artha, there is no Shabda and Jnana. And then in Jnana, there is no Shabda and Artha. Yet, they seem to be in a unified condition. That's the Vikalpa. So, that's how we understood. The Dhyana would always commence with a nama or with a symbol. A symbol again will have word, meaning, and idea, notion, or jnana. Or Bhagwan Nama would have word, meaning, and the idea, notion, jnana. So these three things are there. And then, if you recall, I explained you with the help of diagram, with the help of 1 rupee coin, placed side by side, placed adjacently, and then one going over the other. Now, when the meditation reaches a ripe condition, profound, ripe and accomplishing condition, that is being now defined in the sutra, which is 42. Smriti parishuddho svarupashunyeva arthamatra nirbhasa nirvitarka. Smriti parishuddho. Literally it would be meaning purification of memory. But that is not what is meant here. Because in case of memory, when we considered the vritti, I said there is no way that the memory can be washed, memory can be cleaned, or there is no way of washing and or dry cleaning kind of a dry cleaning process of vritti, or water cleaning process of vritti, or air cleaning process of vritti. Smriti cannot be purified that way. Memory is memory. Memory is as it is. You can't wash the memory. You cannot clean the memory. Then why the Smriti Parishuddhi here? It has a different connotation here. So what is it? If you recall, I gave you the example when the meditation is on Sri Rama, the word is Sri Rama, the artha is Sri Rama, the jnana is Sri Rama. Now when Sri Rama, which is the artha, which is going to veil the phonetic Rama and jnanatmaka Rama, that would be complete meditation. In that case, the citta is completely subsumed, permeated, 100% permeated, 100% permeation of Sri Rama. So, citta becomes Sri Rama. How does it happen? There are three divisions of it, tripartite division, that I see Rama, I know Rama, I am seeing Rama, I am knowing Rama. So there are three divisions: subjective entity, instrumental entity, and objective entity. I am is subjective entity. Knowing, seeing is instrumental entity. Because the knowing and seeing is by senses, mind, psyche, consciousness. So there is the instrument to know or to see. So that is the instrumental entity. And then objective entity is Sri Rama. Sri Ram, Bhagwan Sri Rama, Purushottam Sri Rama, Maryada Purushottam Sri Rama. That is the artha, in the sense object. So subjective entity, objective entity, and instrumental entity, these three are there. But with the dhyana on Sri Rama, the I am aspect will be eclipsed. Seeing, knowing aspect will be eclipsed by being superimposed by the coin of Sri Rama. And therefore the citta will be completely subsumed, completely occupied by the meditated entity, which is Sri Rama in the example. Then what has gone out of citta now? The space taken by subjective entity, the pronoun I, and the space taken by instrumental entity, these depart from the sight. They depart from citta. Citta being occupied by the object of meditation, the meditated entity, Sri Rama, the rest of the two are gone. So, those are the memory locus. Subjective entity and the instrumental entity, these are memory components, and they are gone. How are they gone? Because Sri Rama is occupying whole citta. So that is by ejecting the subjective entity and instrumental entity. So when they are ejected, that is called Shruti Parishuddho in the Sutra. So the Smriti of the phonetic form of Rama, Shabda Rama, is gone. So also the instrumental, the subjective entity, which is we ourselves, that is svarupa, our form. Our form is the form of I, the pronoun I. So that is also gone. Svarupa shunyam is the word to denote it. So if you bring the example in front of your vision, the 3 coins or one circle with tripartite division, I am seeing Sri Rama. The I is Svarupa, is our Svarupa. So that is also gone. And then I am seeing is also gone. That is how the citta is occupied completely by Sri Rama. So citta becomes Sri Rama. And that is the intuitive mystic revelation of Sri Rama. So in order to mention that your subjective entity also has been occupied by meditated object, that is Sri Rama, that is denoted by Svarupa Shunya Iva. And therefore, what is really appearing? Artha matra nirbhasa. What is the artha? Artha matra is Sri Rama. The meditated entity is Sri Rama. That is also only appearing. And therefore, that is nirvichara samapatti. So this is how the process is completed for Rama Samadhi, Sri Rama Samadhi, Samadhi on Sri Rama. There you will see that there is Smriti Parishuddho aspect. The Smriti Parishuddhi by way of the 2 other divisions of the citta having been totally occupied by artha. Swarupa Shunya is that one's identity is also gone. So in Samadhi, if Sri Ram is a revelation, it is not that I am revealing Sri Rama or I have revealed Sri Rama, because there is no I. Because the citta, mind stuff, has been totally occupied by meditated entity. And therefore Swarupa Shunya and Artha Matra. Artha in this context is Sri Rama, Purushottam, Maryada Purushottam, Bhagwan Sri Rama. That is the Artha on which one is meditating, or we are meditating, and Rama is meditated upon. So that is Artha Matra, and then that is Nirvitarka. So this is accomplished phase of Samadhi process, or culminative phase of Samadhi process. So, Arthamatra Nirbhasa, Shabda and Jnana components totally occupied, permeated, subsumed by meditated entity which is Sri Rama. Therefore the sutra very precisely worded, Shruti Parishuddho Swarupushuneva Arthamatra Nirbhasa Nirvitarka. That is Nirvitarka Samapatti. That is accomplished phase of Samapatti. So even if you look at this Samadhi definition which comes in the 3rd chapter, 3rd sutra, the 3rd chapter begins with defining Dharana, Dhyan, Samadhi. So, dharana is Deshabandha Chittasya dharana, Tatra Pratyaikatanata Dhyanam, Tadeva arthamata nirbhasam svarupa shunya iva samadhi. The same words have come there. Arthamatra nirbhasam svarupa shunyam iva samadhi. Samadhi is arthamatra nirbhasam and svarupa shunyam, and here in Samapatti the process has been delineated and has been explained out. So, if you draw a diagram, you will be able to conceive it better. Draw a circle, and in that circle have three divisions. Now, if the meditation is on Sri Rama, let us allocate half of the citta to Sri Rama, and other half of the citta, namely for I am seeing or knowing. So that's how meditation would start, that I am seeing Sri Rama. That is, I am seeing the image of Sri Rama. So, Sri Rama becomes important aspect in the citta. Therefore, let us allocate 50% of citta to Sri Rama, and then 25-25 each for subjective entity and instrumental entity. Now meditation on Sri Rama becomes more and more profound. So what will happen, which the objective entity of Sri Rama, which was occupying 50% of the citta, will start engulfing the citta gradually, 50 to 65 to 75 to 85 to 95 and 100. So then what happens, as the citta is slowly occupied by the object or the meditated entity by Sri Rama, from 50 to, say, it has gone to 70%, that means the 30% remainder is taken up by subjective entity and instrumental entity, so which will be 15% each. Now the 70% becomes 80%, then it is 10% each. When 80% becomes 90%, then it is 5% each to subjective entity and instrumental entity. And then when Sri Rama occupies 100%, then there is no place for subjective entity and instrumental entity. So I am is gone, subjective entity is gone, knowing, seeing is gone. What remains is only Sri Rama. So if you draw the diagram with circles showing progression of the Rama component slowly expanding, the other two components will slowly shrink correspondingly, and this process will escalate, and ultimately the whole circle will be of Sri Rama, and there is no I, there is no subjective entity, there is no knowing, seeing. So if there is no knowing and seeing, and the whole citta is Sri Rama, that means citta has become Sri Rama. That is becoming. That is transformation. In knowing and seeing, it is not transformation. But in becoming, it is transformation. So, the citta will have become Sri Rama. Therefore, in Samadhi, it is becoming. The yogi has becoming of the nature of meditated entity. So, the meditated itself becomes the yogi, or the yogi becomes meditated. That is what I said during the last session, is that Advaitam with the object of meditation. So that's why in Neo Vedanta it is called Advaita Sakshatkara. Yes, there is oneness, but it is only nirbhasa. Nirbhasa. It seems to be. It appears to be. Citta appears to be having become Sri Rama. So, understand the limited aspect of Advaitam which Patanjali is postulating by his sutra. Even Samadhi Sutra, where it is Arthamartha Nirbhasam Swarupa Shunya Eva Samadhi. So there is Nirbhasa and then it is Eva, as if it is Sri Rama, as if the citta is Sri Rama itself. That is the intuitive mystic experience of Sri Rama, which all these Rama Bhaktas had in their life once, twice, thrice, 10 times, 100 times. Whenever they meditated upon Sri Rama, they became Sri Rama. And then when the Samadhi got revoked, again the division of the citta started appearing. The 100% of Sri Rama slowly dissipated to 95, 90, 80, 70, 60, 50, 40, 30, 20, 10%, and 5%, etc. For the subjective entity to occupy and instrumental entity to occupy the citta. So Samadhi is also revoked. So that is how Samadhi is explained by the phase of Nirvitarka Samapatti. So we were trying to understand the terminologies of Smriti Parishuddhi in the sutra, Svarupa Shunya Iva in the sutra, Arthamatra Nirbhasa in the sutra, and that is Nirvitarka Samapatti. That is accomplished state of Dhyanam, which is Samadhi. So it begins with dharana. The mind is confined to object of meditation. Then after having had the confinement, then there is a continuum of Sri Rama perception, cognition in the mind. So it becomes a running pattern where the content is all the time Sri Rama, Sri Rama, Sri Rama, Sri Rama. That is dhyana. So no other object is interfering or having any infiltration. There is no infiltration of another object. There is a continuous flow of the meditated object in the process of in the citta, and that is called tatra pratyayikatanata. Pratyayikatanata, wonderful word which is devised by Patanjali, and that is dhyanam. And when the dhyana becomes more profound and profused, then what just now we saw, that arthamatra nirbhasa swarupa shunya iva by Smriti Parishuddhi, that means any memory of the phonetic aspect or the instrumental aspect is gone. It's totally occupied. It is totally converted. It's gone means that it gets converted, because Sri Rama is slowly expanding in the citta, and by expanding these things are engulfed. The other two parts are slowly engulfed. It's not that they are ejected, but they are engulfed. They are transformed. So I am is transformed into Rama. Knowing, seeing, etc. is transformed into Rama. Therefore, it is complete occupancy of the citta by Sri Rama, the meditated entity, meditated upon entity. So it is therefore transformation. Subjective entity is transformed into Sri Rama gradually, because it's a meditation is a process, dhyana is a process, samadhi is a process. So that's how, when the artha is engulfing the other two, they are getting converted. I am gets dissolved into Sri Rama. Knowing or seeing or thinking dissolved into Sri Rama. Like salt dissolves in water, sugar dissolves in milk. The two divisions dissolve in Sri Rama. And that's why they are transformed. When they are dissolved, they are transformed into Sri Rama, the artha matra. So that is how the Samadhi process has been beautifully described by Patanjali in the sutras that we saw. The sutra 2.41, 2.42, and now 2.43. So these three sutras are beautifully delineating on Samadhi process. Now this is Savitarka. Now Savitarka means, you should recall that this is a description of Vitarka Nugata Sampragnata Samadhi. And the Vitarka Nugata means, Vitarka means those 16 categories you should recall, otherwise you revisit that lesson where it described that there are 16 aspects in the factors of the Vitarka category. So Sri Rama is an object for us. Image, form, and the characteristics. And therefore it is Vitarka. Therefore this is Savitarka, Nirvitarka, Samapatti, which are described. But then there is Vicharanukata Sampragnata Samadhi, which is our more subtler aspect of meditated object, or meditated upon object, or meditated upon entity. That is for Vicharanugata. So now Patanjali sets describing the Samapatti on subtler aspects. So you can imagine, if you are meditating on Sri Rama, you would end up in what condition? If someone like Tyagaraja, Hanuman, Tulsidas, Sri Ramadas, if they meditated upon Sri Rama, we would know that the grade would be definitely higher than our grade of meditation on Sri Rama. We would get engrossed with Sri Rama, the figure, the form, our idea of Sri Rama, which comes in from reading Srimad Valmiki Ramayanam. But the Rama Bhaktas such as Hanuman did not get idea, notion, devotion for Sri Rama by reading Srimad Ramayanam. Now, if we are going to become devotee of Sri Rama, we are going to be getting that bhakti, the material of bhakti, by reading and then contemplating, and by getting impacted, influenced by Sri Rama as depicted in Srimad Ramayanam of Valmiki, or any Ramayanam of whoever has written, because there are many Ramayanas available. But that is the source for us to become devotee of Ramayana, our Sri Rama. So our matter for devotion is collected from life of Sri Rama. But whereas Hanuman, you will very know historically that when Hanuman was around in Treta Yugam, it was not because of Ramayanam that he had read, it was not because of Ramayanam that was so influencing, and it is not because of Srimad Ramayanam that impacted, but Sri Rama, by different channel, was a coveted object of Sri Hanuman. So that's the Rama principle. There is Rama principle. For us, Rama is an object. Rama vigrahavan dharmaha, Purushottama Ramaha, Maryada Purushottam Sri Rama. So this is the material for our meditation on Sri Rama. But then there are subtler aspects, metaphysical aspects of Sri Rama, which you can now understand through Nirgunopasana of Sri Rama. We will be meditating on Saguna Rama, all his qualities, the valor, the straightforwardness, the candidacy, the selflessness, the magnanimity, etc., etc. But someone like Sri Ramdas or Sri Hanuman or Tulsidas or Tyagaraj, they had fallen in love with Rama for different reasons. Very essence of Sri Rama. The very essence of Sri Rama was the support for their meditation. Unlike for us, we have the form of Sri Rama. Ajanabahu, Dhanurdhara Sri Rama, Sharangapani Sri Rama, Sita Sameta, Sita Lakshmana Sameta Sri Rama. So this is the material for our meditation on Sri Rama. Whereas there can be a Vichara plane of Samadhi on Sri Rama. So for us to understand, it is something that can be called as Nirguna Sri Rama. Rama is a principle. Rama as a metaphysical, eternal principle. Our Sri Rama, in one sense, is not eternal. In the sense we take it from Srimad Ramayanam, then we know that Rama was born at particular point in time, was born of Dasharatha and Kausalya, and then finally immersed in Sharayu at some point in time, and went back to his abode, Saketa Loka. It is called Saketa Lokam. So, for us, he came from Saketa Lokam and went back to Saketa Lokam. But in Nirguna Upasana, it is not Dasharathi Sri Rama for Kabir. It was not Sitapati Sri Rama for Kabir. It was not Swami of Hanuman for Kabir. It was Nirguna Bhakti. So you will have to somewhere understand Saguna Nirguna Bhakti, then you will be able to understand the Vichara material for Samprajnat Samadhi. So then comes the Vichara aspect, which is more elevated form of Dhyanam on Sri Rama. Precisely, maybe Rama Bhaktas such as Sri Ramdas, Sri Tulsidas, then Sri Hanuman, they also commenced the meditation on form of Sri Rama, but they went beyond, where you and me would be, perhaps if we reach Samadhi, we would reach somewhere, but they would go beyond that. They would go to very principle of Rama, eternal principle of Sri Rama. Not just Treta Yogin Sri Rama, but eternal principle. So that is subtler form. That's called Sri Rama principle, Sri Rama Tattva. So if you happen to look into Sri Rama Rahasyam, which has come down to us traditionally, which explains Sri Rama and Sri Rama Rahasyam. So that is this is the meditation on Rahasyam. So they take a step beyond. Our meditation would end at Bhagwan Sri Rama, Purushottam Sri Rama. But there is a scope to go beyond. Because he is Sanatana Purusha. Sri Rama is Sanatana Purusha and not just Treta Yuga Kalina Purusha. So there's something called Rama principle, Rama Tattvam. So they meditate on Rama Tattva, they can go a step beyond. Then it would become Vicharanugata sampragnata samadhi, which is on metaphysical entity of Sri Rama, or metaphysical entity of Sri Rama Tattvam. That is the Vitarkanugata sampragnat samadhi. So that Rama is not with the form Pitambara Dhari, Neelavarana, then Kamalanayana, Kirita Mukutadhari. It's not that form. They go into principle of Sri Rama, which doesn't have all these things with which Sri Rama is clad. That is called Vitarkanugata Sampragnat Samadhi, and to explain that, Patanjali begins to mention another phase of Samapatti, class of Samapatti, which is called class of Savichara, Nirvichara. Savitarka, Nirvitarka have been explained, and we try to delineate on it, we try to decipher it. Savitarka, Nirvitarka, which are on grosser form of Sri Rama. But when the meditation is on subtler principles, then they are not called Vitarka, they are called Vichara. Savichara, Nirvichara. Vichara, Sukshma Vishaya. If you recall, Sampragnat topic, Vyasa clarified there. Vichara, Sukshma Vichara. Sukshma Alambanam. Vitarka, Sthula Alambanam. So Savitarka, Nirvitarka have a Sthula Alambanam, gross support, and in Savichara, Nirvichara it is subtle support. So therefore Patanjali is now explaining the class of Savichara and Nirvichara Samapatti. And more importantly, he begins by saying that Savitarka, Nirvitarka having been explained, having as they stand explained in the sutras 242 and 243, he says, they having been explained in the realm of subtle, which is the Savichara, Nirvichara, he says, they too stand explained. It is same process as Savitarka, Nirvitarka was delineated, and we saw with analogies, etc., for our comprehension. Therefore, he says, Etayyaiva Savichara, Nirvichara, Sukshma Vishaya Vyakhyataha. Those having explained, it is same process here also. It starts with Savichara and then it culminates with Nirvichara. Therefore, he says, Etayyaiva Savichara, Nirvichara, Sukshma Vishaya Vyakhyata. So those having described and explained, these two stand explained because there is that similarity. There it was Shabdartha Jnana Vikalpa to start with, and then it was Spruti Parishuddhi, Arthamata Nirbhasa, Svarupa Shunya, and similarly it is here also. That there is a commencement phase by way of Savichara Samapatti and culminative phase by way of Nirvichara Samapatti. So, if earlier process is understood, this too should be understood, can be understood, may be understood. This is what Patanjali expects. And therefore, he gives a definition in that form. They having been explained, these two stand explained. Therefore, the sutra Etayyaiva, as they were explained in the same way, Savichara, Nirvichara, two, which are in the realm of Sukshma Vishayas, are also explained. So now we will have to understand how the Savichara plane is and how the Nirvichara plane is. As we understood the Savitarka plane and Nirvitarka plane, the distinction between the two, or the transformation from Savitarka to Nirvitarka, what is coming in and what is going out, what is weeded out and what is coming in for transformation, it is similarly that we will have to understand here as to what are the components of Savichara Samapatti plane and what are Nirvichara Samapatti plane. Now, this being realm of subtle, there is no nama, there is no rupa. Like we took the example of Sri Rama, Rama as a nama, Rama as a rupa, Rama as a name and Rama as a form. Now that is not here because this is subtler plane. Or we took the example of cow, the word, the meaning and the knowledge. Now in case of subtle, metaphysically subtle aspects, you don't have something as the word and their corresponding to that something as artha. Because these are in the realm of subtle. There is no shabda artha jnana vikalpa. There is some other kind of vikalpa. For in the gross plane, you have the vikalpa in shabda artha jnanam. But then this is nominal. This is not phenomenal support. Nominal support of meditation. The meditated entity is nominal and therefore there is no shabda artha jnana. It is replaced by something else. What is that something else has to be understood. And therefore, and then in that there is sankirnata and there is vikalpa. That has to be understood. Not the shabdartha jnana sankalpa, the sankirnata and vikalpa, but something else which is replacing shabdartha jnanam in the realm of subtle. And then arthamatra nirbhasam svarupa shunyam. Now the artha is also, you should know, it is nominal. It is not phenomenal. So we will have to understand that these concepts which are coming as a replacement to shabda, artha, jnana, these are replaced. Sankirnata is there. Vikalpa is there in Savichara plane. But then that is also gone in Nirvichara plane. So smriti parishuddhi of what? Because in Savichara, Nirvitarka plane, smriti parishuddhi of the component of shabda and jnana for arthamatra nirbhasa. Shabda component gone, jnana component gone. Then what is really gone here? Because there is no shabda component in subtle, in the realm of subtle. Then what is the knowing of subtle? See, if you want to see elephant, you can see elephant with your naked eyes. But if you want to see bacteria, you will have to take a microscope. On something subtler to that, you can't see by naked eyes. You want to have electron microscope. Those are not naked eye visions. You can't be sighting bacteria by naked eyes. You can't be sighting subtle viruses by naked eyes. You need microscopes. Then somewhere you need electron microscopes. While for figure of Sri Rama, we did not need a microscope. But in the subtle, you don't have naked eye vision or naked intelligence conception or knowledge. Objects are also not phenomenal. They are all very subtle. So let's try to understand what is that. What is replacing shabda? What is replacing artha? What is replacing jnana? Artha is being replaced. Gross is being replaced by subtle. Subtle doesn't have nama rupa. So there is no nama. And the jnana of the subtle is also totally different. It is not naked consciousness cognition. Naked psyche consciousness, cognition. It is something very subtle. So the jnana aspect is also different. So let's try to understand that. So that we'll be trying to decipher the sutra एतयैव सविचारा nirvichara सूक्ष्म विषया व्याख्याताः. But that is next time. Namaskar all of you.